You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 203 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Today, we're back in South Wales near Abergavenny, and I'm meeting Huw Evans, who runs Three Pools Farm. Three Pools is a 141-acre farm made up of a mixture of pasture and woodland. Located in the foothills of the Black Mountains, the farm is inspired by permaculture design. Something that I don't think that we have yet touched on the podcast. So that'll be an interesting one today. In addition to many different animals and crops on the farm, Three Pools puts on several events and glamping, which I'm sure Huw will also tell us about today. Huw, welcome to Meet the Farmers. How's your week going? How are things?
Week's been pretty good. We had a pretty successful event last weekend, kind of 400 people music festival. Next weekend, got a pretty big wedding, and that's going to be the last in a run of 7 consecutive weekends. So we'll get a little break coming up.
Wow. Have you done the event since the start?
Yeah, it's kind of what we started with. I have a background partly in events. The event is our financial bridge to get us from one line of agricultural thinking to another.
Yeah. The usual struggle, find something else as well. We were in South Wales a couple of episodes ago in Monmouthshire, and we've moved slightly further west today. But tell us about the sort of landscape. I mean, I know it pretty well, but that landscape surrounding Abergavenny in the foothills of the Black Mountains, what's it like around you? Describe the landscape.
So we've got the Brecon Beacons and the Black Mountains to the west, which means we're in a bit of a rain shadow here. So it's always raining in Wales, yeah, but not over here. My parents live just outside Carmarthen in West Wales, and I'll wake up here, it'll be a lovely sunny day. But I'll go, the parents have barbecue, get barbecue stuff, drive over halfway through the mountains. It's like, oh yeah, it's drizzling. But yeah, it's like the Wye and Usk valleys, which are two of the more decent rivers in the UK. So it's a pretty healthy area. Yeah.
How long have you been where you are?
6 years.
Okay.
It was 2017.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of change in quite a short amount of time then, given how much you're doing.
Yeah, it's been pretty full on.
So take us back to the beginning a bit in terms of your farming journey and how you're interested in it all started and why you came to this farm.
I was doing a master's in initially civil and structural engineering, and I had a year out partway through my degree, and I was at a friend's house, and his housemate was watching a lecture on permaculture. I sat down beside him, I waited for my mate, and watched it too, and I thought, this is really good stuff. I went away and watched another 70 hours or so of lectures on it. And then I switched from civil and structural to civil and environmental engineering, and basically made my degree just look at landscape scale land management as an engineering solution.
Amazing. That was all based. That was all based on that experience.
Yeah, the chance of it is pretty random. And yeah, I then was looking at landscape land management from an engineering perspective. So kind of how are you managing flood risk? How are you managing water quality? And there's just so much opportunity there that in the UK we don't necessarily make use of because of conflicting goals from agriculture. Yeah. So then I started looking at what are the different agricultural practices, mindsets that think about how do we add in these extra goals as well. And permaculture it fits with that really well.
And I assume that in terms of your mindset and thinking, that's where a lot the sort of systems design and overall sort of functioning comes from.
Yeah. So when I finished my master's, my master's kind of ended up just being market research. And when I finished, I then wrote the business plan. Took a year to write the business plan. Convinced family to mortgage a family home, bank to lend us money, and bought a farm. And then it was like, oh yeah, how do you actually farm? Go beyond just the theory. So yeah, that's been the journey over the last 6 years.
Yeah. What was that first year like?
It was pretty chill, to be honest, because we only had about 50 sheep. Our main focus was fixing up the farmhouse that didn't have any heating. If
Yeah.
you weren't wearing slippers and touched the wrong plug socket, you got electrocuted. That kind of vibe.
Yeah. Sounds fun. Um, but let's turn to permaculture as a whole, because there might be, I'm guessing, probably quite a lot of listeners who maybe have heard about it but don't really know much about it. What is permaculture in sort of broad brush terms?
For me, it's a design system methodology. So it's a set of principles and ethics which you use to review your decision making. And lots of people have different ways of viewing permaculture, but for me, that's it. Coming from an engineering background, which is around design, it's just these set of decision making tools. It's not a description of features. It's not a greenhouse with tomatoes and chickens in it. It's a way of thinking that can lead to certain outcomes.
Yeah. And actually taking that viewpoint on it, it all of a sudden makes scale seem irrelevant, doesn't it? Because actually, if you're looking, you can look at any system, whereas I don't know. I mean, certainly my natural thinking, I suppose, with permaculture does tend to be for smaller scale models. But I think that tends to be because that's mostly in the main how it's taken part. But there's nothing saying that you can't do that on a huge scale, is there? Or even on a landscape scale.
Absolutely. Yeah. In a UK context, particularly, it's much more smallholder. It's actually quite urban in the UK. It's a lot about community building. The fact that it includes thinking about the people quite strongly within the design, I think, is important. Thinking about the community, the living situation is a bit more holistic than some of the other design systems there are kicking around.
You say in the UK, so I assume that I'm reading from that overseas in some parts of the world it's slightly more prevalent.
Yeah, Australia, North America, even in some parts of Europe, there are some much bigger projects. But there's obviously very different contexts in those countries in terms of the amount of land there is.
Yeah. And in terms of its sort of history as a concept, does it go back quite far?
Not that far. Was it Bill Mollison in the 80s in Tasmania? I think it's credited.
Oh wow.
Was
Okay.
like the original guy. Then Jeff Lawson, who's also in Australia, was pretty influential.
Let's turn towards produce production on the farm. So I'm guessing there's quite a lot, but what have you got going on, and how has that changed over time, over those 6 years?
So we started out with just 50 sheep, and then grazing is about 120 acre grazing platform. 50 sheep doesn't really get through that grass.
Yeah.
So kind of the attitude of like more sheep. And then it's like, well, we still don't really get through that grass. And the historical context of here is there were always a lot of sheep. So kind of sheep sick pastures is what people were saying. So we brought in cows partly to improve the health of the sheep and
Okay.
also to help get through all the grass. I've ended up potentially favouring the cows these days. But
Huh.
we then also brought in pigs because we wanted to add a bit more disturbance into the areas outside of the pasture. The theory being that's going to improve biodiversity. And then we've got a small orchard. We've extended the orchard and we planted kind of agroforestry areas, a little test case. And then last spring we planted a 4 acre vineyard. We've got bees. What else are we doing? Yeah, that's the main products. Or if you can think about what can you produce agriculture, it's not just food. It's food, fiber, fuel, medicine.
Yep.
So that's the kind of livestock and the wine. Fiber, producing wool, fuel, producing firewood, medicine. You could say that people coming to spend time here and enjoying a beautiful landscape that improves their well-being.
Yep.
That is medicine. That's
Yeah.
an agricultural output.
This episode is being supported by our primary sponsor, A Plant Rural. Why did I want to collaborate with Apeland Rural? Well, having got to know them, their team shares my passion for giving a voice to farmers, and we are both driven to raise the profile of farming voices to a wider audience. So it seemed quite a good fit. Quite frankly, together we will be able to do a lot more. Apeland Rural do a lot of work on social media themselves, sharing farming accounts and farming stories. They have a rural community blog which shares farmers' experiences, and they also support a growing number of initiatives that champion UK farmers, including this podcast. So a big thank you to Apeland Rural for supporting Meet the Farmers. And is the aspiration that you keep on adding to this, or do you reach a point where, because also there must be, I'm thinking in terms of management time and in terms of just this time on the ground as well, is there a limit there, or do you just look to permanently grow?
That's a good question. We try things out and some of them don't work. And the
Okay.
things that work, we do more of. So, like, we did the whole inoculating loads of mushroom logs with
Yeah.
mushrooms and it didn't work. But we put
Yeah.
loads of time into it. I'll be interested in doing it again, but not if it doesn't work. I'm not entirely sure what we got wrong there. But yeah, it's balancing workloads and kind of now we've been here a few years, is we know certain things work and certain things don't work.
You say we, so who's involved on the ground? Who's doing what?
So we've got a reasonable team here. There's me plus three full-time employees plus three long-term volunteers plus temporary volunteers. I originally came with just some close friends. There was just three of us, then four of us. There's been a bit of cycle of some people have gone off to go back to study or move on to other things. None of us have really come from a farming background. So it's been a journey in terms of none of us know what we're doing, but we're all just giving it a go.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
clearly working.
it is working, yeah. It's a lot more settled now.
It's a vision. Where would you like to take it? Because I mean, you've set, I suppose, a foundation of core enterprises. You've got the events. You've got people coming onto the farm. So in many ways, it's fulfilling a lot of what you set out to do already. But are you driven by a vision of something you're trying to achieve, or are you just driven by we're doing this day to day and that's enough?
Yeah, the vision of what we're trying to achieve. So from my master's, one of the conclusions was um, we need to change the way the subsidy system works, and we need an evidence base for designing that. And in the UK, people aren't practicing permaculture significant scale. So if we go and do this, part of the point of getting a bigger farm is like, can we engage with academics, record data, provide any kind of evidence base that might influence policy design? Getting academics in to study is harder than you'd think. We have managed to record some data, but moving forward, it's how far can we take the idea to create a radically different looking landscape that functions differently, that we can bring people here and be like, look at this bit worked, this bit didn't, this kind of thing could be replicable on your farm, this bit maybe not so replicable. As it completely matures as a system, it's going to be just such a stunningly different example of what farmland could look like.
Yeah. And in terms of that inspiration side, in terms of reaction from either farming community in your part of the world or farming community generally, and also those outside the farming community, what reaction have you had so far? What conversations have you had with other farmers, and have you seen any direct influence elsewhere?
Initially, when we arrived here, there was definitely like, who are these rich English
Yeah,
people?
of course.
But as we've matured as a farm, as a business, people can see we're actually doing quite a lot and producing stuff that's high quality, getting recognition for it. So I don't think they're going to start copying some of the more structural changes. There's definitely an acceptance of us within the community. And I think it's going to take more than 6 years to get to the point where anyone's like, okay, we'll try that.
And I suppose that goes for, we're talking about permaculture here, obviously, but that could go for any other kind of system change, I suppose. Is it because generally as a farm community there is a fixed mindset in to a certain extent in terms of the way that you do things, the way that you have done things, and actually the fear factor of stepping outside of that Is that, I mean, that's perhaps a leading question, but is that the thing that's that in your view could be the big shift here, or is there actually more of a practical reason to, for example, why why would a farmer who's not currently undertaking permaculture design, why would they consider it? What's holding them back?
So there's a couple of things there. If you've got a farming system which financially supports you and your family, it would be reckless to kind of tear that up and move to a different system. But within permaculture design, it recognizes that. So I think it is more just people don't know about permaculture, don't understand it, and how you could apply that to other situations. Say you've got a commercial chicken farm that supports a family, you can take the principles and ethics and apply it to it. You're not going to just radically knock down the barn, but you can think about how you're going to tinker with the edges to make it a bit more sustainable and a bit more balanced. Awareness of what it is more of a barrier than actually delivering the idea in itself.
Meet the Farmers is brought to you by Rural Pod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations, and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. Rural Pod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast, you're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk. And I assume that for other permaculture sites that you've seen, visited, are there set characteristics, I suppose, between them?
There's some similarities in terms of I've seen quite a lot of use of agroforestry and rotation grazing, those concepts. But the biggest bit I've seen is just it's around including people within the system, either through running events or really tapping into the community as your roots market, or running kind of health and well-being or psychotherapy, all sorts of people-focused businesses, and that giving the financial stability that allows a bit more creativity with the farming side of things. If the kind of end point of permaculture design is going to be a diverse perennial landscape filled with complexity, you can't plant that within a conventional system and keep managing it the same way and think you're going to have the same output, because you're going to have to take a certain amount of land out of productivity before those trees, which are going to take 10, 15, 20 years to become productive, they're not going to come online. So you're just cutting some production initially. How are you going to make the finances work?
I mean, you've been there 6 years. In terms of future, in terms of what's actually happening on the ground, what are the next changes on the ground, projects happening, perhaps events as well, perhaps new event ideas?
New event ideas. Also, in the last couple of years, we've renovated a couple of the barns so that they hold noise much better.
Okay.
And the roof doesn't leak, kind of thing. And the quality of what we've got has gone up a lot, where before we were running some raves, more kind of it vibe. Now we can offer a bit more of a quality experience, a bit more rounded. Now that our food production has increased, we can have more food focused events. With the livestock systems, initially it was like, we need more livestock. We've got to the point now where we're cutting back on livestock and refining systems just to make it easier for us. I guess the next stage would be, how do we take, say, the agroforestry kind of concepts and put that on a wider area of the farm? Because sheep just won't respect the electric fence around apple trees. That's what we found. So how do we maintain having sheep within the system where cows perform really well?
Just a little more about our primary sponsor, A-Plan Rural. They provide bespoke insurance cover for farms and estates. This could be for anything from tractors and machinery to a new exciting diversification venture. So for more information, visit aplan.co.uk/rural. That's aplan.co.uk/rural. /rural. If you could pick maybe a couple of big learning points that you've made over the last 6 years since you started, and perhaps thinking if someone was interested in taking the leap and doing something similar to what you've done, what have those learning points been you would like to have told yourself when you started out?
Good question. When I first came here, I had this engineering mindset, design mindset. I'm just gonna sketch stuff on maps of the farm and create this radically different landscape. And what I found myself doing is managing a team of people, and they're the important people that make everything happen. And I'm actually become a people person rather than just a designer. And I couldn't have done anything that's happened here without the team. And so managing a team, keeping them happy, how to support them to achieve what they're trying to do, that's been what's most important, what I get up to.
That's an interesting one. That's yeah. So often it comes down to the people. We're going to start to round things up, and I'm going to ask you the last two questions that I ask everyone before they come on when they come on the show. The first is, Huw, if you have a message for the public, any message, what would it be?
Don't fear complexity. A lot of people are trying to make more environmental food choices, and a regular one is to cut meat out. And from what I've learned, that's a massive oversimplification of how to pick environmental food choices. It's not the cow, it's the how. Also, it's not the plow, it's the how.
Yeah.
There's loads of different ways to do arable systems. Arable systems can be more damaging than livestock systems. Livestock systems can be really bad. Anything can be done well or badly. It's not just that thing, that individual thing, that just species. We get cut that out. That doesn't make any sense. So yeah, don't fear complexity. Actually look into production systems. Look into where you're sourcing from, because that's how to make better food choices.
And your message to farmers?
There's so much opportunity out there. Farming is the only industry which isn't just looking to minimize its pollution. It's the only industry which can provide an incredibly societally valuable output on a massive scale. So just look at the opportunities and think bigger. We could completely redesign the British landscape and make it crazy functional with massive benefits to everyone in society. Let's do that.
So Huw, a recommendation for a blog, podcast, or social media account to follow. This can be farming or non-farming. What do you want to talk about?
Blind Boy podcast. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's an Irish lad who's just having monologues, but it's about art, it's about mental health. It's some of the most interesting, irrelevant stuff you could possibly think about, with a beautiful, relaxing voice. I highly recommend it. It can make you laugh and cry in the same episode while talking about the inside of a tennis ball.
Great. That's a new one for this. It's on my list. I'll go and check it out.
Blind
Nice
Boy.
recommendation. I think that is a good point to end it on. Finally, I'm not going to let you go without you doing a shout out for how people can actually find out more about you and maybe go along to one of your events. What are your contacts?
That's a good question. Instagram, Three Balls Permaculture Farm. Our website, threeballs.co.uk. Sign up for the mailing list. It's on the mailing list that we send out the invitations for guest chef type events. I think those are the best two places to find us.
Brilliant. Go and check them out, guys. We'll leave it there. But big thanks to Huw for coming on the show. Thanks for telling us about what you do. And honestly, I think it's fantastic in such a short amount of time. I think it's actually unbelievable in such a short amount of time how much you've done. So and it's great that you've got people, getting people back on the land. It's one of those great examples of a farm where you actually have a growing number of people back on the land, both paid and voluntary. You're making a way. So yeah, good luck. Good luck for the future, and I hope it all goes well.
Thank you. And thanks for having me.
My pleasure. that is it for today. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Next week, we'll have a bonus episode talking about farm profitability. And after that, I'm off to Groundswell. And we'll have a special episode coming to you from there. On the Rural Business Focus podcast this week, I'm joined by Devon-based outdoor wear entrepreneur Amanda Marshall. You can find that podcast wherever you're listening to this one. Thanks again to Huw for today and to our primary podcast sponsor, A-Plan Rural Insurance, for supporting the show. Any info you might need is in the show notes. Check those out. For now, though, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you'll have a great week.